But he has 2 presentations on YouTube.
Yeah, he's just 2 episodes.
Eh?
He's both his ones are first and.
No, he's only done one.
Oh, Gary.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Okay, you guys ready for it? Okay, good evening.
Okay,
everybody.
it was very noisy. But
Oh.
we are thinking that we can just close the window for now. What do you do?
I just want to leave it. I think you got to
Turn on
to the
the
one side.
turn on that.
Yeah.
How many
That's
Close
it.
it for now.
Yeah.
No, it's quiet enough.
Oh, I think it's jacket.
Alright.
It's cool.
Just gotta do some positioning here.
It's hot inside.
You ready?
Okay, good to go.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So, I will be presenting on whether value is riskier than growth, or rather, this is the topic brought forth by Petkova and Zhang, an article which I started off with. But I'm going to take you through it and tell you exactly to bring you to the point where I tell you what my research idea is. Okay, so first what we're going to do is we're going to look at the documentation of the value anomaly, where it started, and empirical evidence surrounding the value anomaly. The rationale for the value premium that has been documented. So there are basically 2 schools of thought surrounding the explanation and for the value premium, and that is one, the irrational perspective, and from a rational perspective. And then we're going to overview the article which I started out with, which is from Petkova and Zhang, with the 2005 title, Is Value Riskier Than Growth? So we're going to look at the argument, the methodology they employed, and the results which they found. So where they stopped with their result is actually where I'm going to start off with my research idea, and I'll take you through that. Alright, so before we actually get to what the value anomaly is, let's start with modern portfolio theory, EMH, and the CAPM. So the postulations of all 3 the things that I've just mentioned is that if markets are efficient, the capital asset pricing model can actually capture the cross-section of stock returns. So basically what that means is that with the capital asset pricing model, any stock that is regressed with a particular formula, there should not be any regression intercept, which is known as alpha, because that would mean that an investor can accrue abnormal profits. So that is basically what an anomaly is. Now let's just go back to what a value stock is relative to a growth stock. So value stocks are stocks that have high fundamental value relative to the value as given by the market, which is in the form of price. So the kind of ratios that actually can indicate whether a stock is value or growth would be your earnings to price ratio, and so on. So first, it was Basu in 1977 and 1983 that actually documented evidence for the value anomaly. So what he found is that over the examination period for the New York Stock Exchange is that the high earnings to price stocks outperform low earnings to price stocks. So that means that value stocks outperform growth stocks. And he attributed these kind of results to the fact that markets were inefficient. So if we go back, like for example, Ryan and Ashley presented on the theoretical perspective, we know that tests of the CAPM can result in tests of market efficiency, and that is known as the joint hypothesis. So that is exactly how we interpreted it. But Former and French later come in and they say, yes, the CAPM is not sufficient in explaining the cross-section of returns, but what they do is they extend the CAPM by adding 2 risk factors. So the cross-section of returns, they then find that alpha is not significantly different from 0, so which means there is no abnormal profit to be earned if the returns are then regressed over the 3-factor model, which of course is in contradiction with the results that Basu finds that there's actually that markets are inefficient. Then Lakonisok, Schleifer, and Vishny also test the and find evidence of the value anomaly as such. Okay, so what they find is, but I'll take you through that later, but what they find basically is that, but we'll get to that with the perspectives. Okay, so as I explained in the contents, that there are 2 schools of thought surrounding whether or not the value premium is rational or irrational. Rational being that it is basically the value premium, which is value stocks outperforming growth stocks, is priced within equilibrium, and the reason why it persists is because of compensation that is received for risk. But there is also another school of thought, which is the irrational perspective, which assumes that the value premium, the reason why the value premium arises is because of irrational behavior of investors. So what happens is that the irrational behavior of investors causes the systematic overshooting of stock prices. What then happens in this situation is that value stocks actually exploit the overreaction within the market, and that's how they accrue positive abnormal returns relative to growth stocks. Okay, so also what even Pitko and Zhang consider an early manifestation of the value premium or the value anomaly is what DuPont and Taylor found, where past loser stocks outperform their growth counterparts after they have been formed. So that's also part of the rational explanation. Also, LSV, they find that what investors do is, due to their irrational behavior, they extrapolate growth too far into the future. So basically what they perceive as growth right now, they assume that it will continue too far into the future, and this causes overreaction, which then the value stocks exploit that overreaction, and over time they outperform their growth counterparts.
During the period of mean reversion.
Yes, exactly.
So, like when you look at the momentum stocks or growth stocks, I mean the first period in the short term, that's why we always say short-term momentum. Because in the short term, investors overreact to the positive information. So winners outperform the losers. So that is overreaction. But as a consequence, I mean subsequently, in the mean reversion, that is when your loser outperform winner or for example, value outperform growth. So it's always the overreaction in the short term, mean reversion in the long term.
Yes, so then the mistake is actually realized in the long term, and then that gives rise to mean reversion. Okay, so what LSB actually said, oh, by the way, I'm using the acronym LSB for these guys over there, Lakhani, Shok, Schlichter, and Vishni. What they say is that if value stocks are to be fundamentally riskier than growth stocks, they need to underperform growth stocks by some frequency, particularly in times when the marginal utility of wealth is high. Now, if we look at economics, if you guys think economics, basically what marginal utility of wealth is if you get your marginal utility graph, the additional utility that you receive from 1 unit increase in wealth. Now, we know that marginal utility, with that in mind, marginal utility is actually higher in times where there is an economic downturn or so, because if you get 1 extra additional wealth, it means way more to you than getting it when in a different state of the economy, which is probably in peaks.
So means that during, I mean, when for example during recession, I get 1 extra rand, it means a lot to me. But for example, if the economy is well and then everything's stable, for me to get that 1 extra rand, it's really marginal diminution. Yeah, when I can each extra rand.
Exactly. So that's what they say, is that value stocks are to underperform by some frequency in states of the economy where the marginal utility of wealth is high. So that gives rise to the rational perspective. So basically what the rational perspective says is that the value premium, and I'm referring to value premium because it's the value stocks, the return minus the growth stocks. So the value premium is priced in equilibrium. So that means that the only thing that is accruing all these positive abnormal returns to the value premium is the fact that it is compensation for risk undertaken. So basically, if you take on systematic risk, you are getting rewarded for the amount of risk that you are taking on, and that reward would be in the form of the value stocks outperforming growth stocks. Also, with this view comes the idea that, so in the paper when we see, and when we computed, like when we did it maybe in third year or so, the beta was consistent and it was the same for the examination period. But here, what these guys basically in Pitko and Zhang are putting forth is time-varying risk premiums and time-varying beta. So basically what happens when the marginal utility of wealth is high, they assume that the expected market risk premium would be higher, because then the beta loading, if the beta loading also co-varies positively with the market risk premium, the returns accrued to value or growth stocks, in this case value stocks, would be higher. Also,
is that during the recession
yes,
or during the downturn?
yes,
So during
economic
the
downturn.
downturn, your utility gaining from each rand is higher.
Yes.
So then during this period, what do you say next?
During where there is the marginal utility of wealth is high, therefore what you expect your market risk premium to be would be higher than.
Will be higher.
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
Cool. So then, so basically, risk and risk aversion in states of the economy is also what is important in documenting and actually diagnosing the reason for the existence of the value premium. What that means is that when risk is high and risk aversion is high, also that gives rise to the margin utility. So you can see that it's actually a string of things falling after each other. High margin utility, high market risk premium, and in that case, if they can prove that the value premium has a positive beta, a high beta, that would explain that it is basically compensation for risk. Now what we know about the CAPM is that the measure of systematic risk, which is the only relevant risk to an investor according to them, is beta. So what these guys do basically, they zoom in on beta, try and see that if beta is not constant and it varies according to business cycles, and so does market risk premium, this could be the reason why we observe the value premium and why perhaps it persists. Which takes us to Petco and Zang. Is value riskier than growth? Okay, what they do is they try to diagnose the relative risk of value and growth stocks, and they do so by making use of a conditional capital asset pricing model, which I'll explain to you right now. Okay, so they believe that the beta varies in accordance to states of the world. So beta can't be constant. In economic downturns, there is a different beta than it would be in economic expansions or peaks. Okay, so what they do further, which you will see also once I explain the methodology, is that the beta premium, they estimate a beta premium sensitivity, and that would then determine the relative risk associated with the value premium.
Okay, so in general, the instability of beta, I mean,
Yes.
in the earlier years, there were a lot of tests done to test the stability of beta, to test the slope of the CAPM and so on and so on. Basically, all involved around the test of the CAPM. And
Yeah.
one of the major problem researchers have with CAPM is the stability of beta. But it has never ever used it as a kind of explanation to create something else. And this is something that actually goes a step further,
Yes.
that you can actually do something about it.
Yeah, and estimate, because that's what the beta premium does. It's an estimator for the instability of beta. Okay, so what they do is the methodology. Basically, they just want to see whether the beta premium sensitivity is positive for the value premium, which is value stocks minus growth stocks, the returns thereof. And if it is positive, then that would support their story. But what they do additionally also, they make use of, like I mentioned before, a conditional CAPM. They regress the returns of the value premium across the conditional CAPM to see if that holds, and they actually find, okay, I'll let you know what they find. So the methodology they employ is really interesting, and I've never come across it before. So what they do is, firstly, they sort their betas on expected market risk premium, right? So the states of the world, remember I said that they believe that the beta and the market risk premium varies according to the states of the world, which would be across the business cycle. Is it?
Caesar, we book up to 5:30.
Okay, 10 minutes.
They say 10 minutes, yeah.
Fine. Oh, we have presentations.
So I can't afford to start late.
Yeah, give us 10 minutes, Nigel. We book up to 5:30.
Pardon?
We book up to 5:30.
But we go from 5.
So give us 10 minutes. Give us 10 minutes.
It's a bit tricky because I'm going to... Another 10 minutes.
This is 30 minutes of the 10.
No, give us 10 minutes. Give us the 10 minutes.
Please.
The Russian-
No.
Huh?
We could have been done by now.
Okay, sorry about that, guys. So they sort the betas and they sort the marketers premium to determine the different states of the economy. So, for example, state peak would be where the marketers premium is observed for the lowest 10%, because the marketers premium is low 4 times when you peak. Remember the marginal utility argument that I gave before. Okay, so what they do next is that they estimate beta, because beta and the marketers premium that they're referring to is unobservable in nature. What they do is they estimate these on conditional variables. I think there were some guys before them, I'm not too sure who they were, I think it's Litow and Ludwigsen, could be wrong, but they also used the conditional capping, but they used something called K, which is like the labor income and so on. But what they do is they declare that what they use as conditional macroeconomic variables to estimate beta and the market risk premium is better because it relates to the business cycle, so it will give them a more accurate outcome. So they estimate the conditional variables. Also then, do you see this formula over here? So basically this is the value premium is equal to this over here. So this is the estimator for the market risk premium, the average market risk premium, estimator for the average beta. And what this is here is also, like as you see this this last term over here, that is the beta premium in sensitivity. So this over here would be able to tell you whether the value premium, if this is positive over here, if the beta sensitivity is positive, that would support their story that the reason why the value premium exists and the reason why we document the value premium is the fact that it is basically compensation.
Basically, they want to see if the value premium increases or decreases throughout the economic cycle.
Yeah. So what they do is, so they need to estimate the average market risk premium, and they need to estimate the beta premium sensitivity. What they use is a macroeconometric model called general method of moments. The reason why they use this is because there could be measurement discrepancies if any other method was used. But what's cool about the GMM is the fact that when you estimate, like the reason why GMM is used in the first place is if they are more than, if the variables that you're trying to estimate are greater than the degrees of freedom, basically. So then they use that and they estimate the average beta, expected market risk premium, and the premium sensitivity, which will then tell them whether the beta and market risk premium vary according to the business cycle, which then supports why the value stocks outperform growth stocks. What they do as a final result also, they run the conditional CAPM regressions to see if the conditional CAPM actually holds. Okay, so the results and the findings, they find that there is a positive beta premium sensitivity found on value stocks relative to growth stocks, so that is for the value premium. That supports their story. However, when they run the conditional CAPM regressions, they find that there is still, that alpha cannot be declared significantly different from 0. So there still exists alpha and there still exists abnormal returns accrued to value stocks relative to growth stocks. This of course gives, and these results obviously support Llewellyn and Nagel, and they declare that the conditional CAPM, yes, it is different from the CAPM, but the difference received, the explanatory power from CAPM to conditional CAPM isn't large enough to warrant that it is better than the CAPM. So what they also do is they modify the test of the overreaction hypothesis. Now in DeBont and Taylor, what DeBont and Taylor use, they use realized market excess returns. They suggest, Petkova and Dan suggest, look, not realized market excess return, but rather expected market risk premium, and then they regressed it and they found results contradicting that of DeBont and Taylor, that value stocks, which they interpret as value stocks actually being riskier than growth. So what they stop at the fact where they say we should consider other possible drivers of the value anomaly and not just the risk-based story. And this is exactly where I step in. So what I want to do firstly is I want to replicate the study by Petkova and Zhang, but not only for the value anomaly, but also extend it to other well-documented anomalies, which is the size anomaly and the momentum effect. I also, in my honors study, what I did was I took the CARD model and I actually modified the loss factor that CARD adds into form of French's 3-factor model, and that was actually to capture mean reversion in the market. So I want to see anything can come out of that. But at its purest form, it will be the replication and the extension of Pekova and Zhang's study. What I wish to do, which I don't know where I'm going to start, but I know I'm not going to rest until I find something that's different from what these guys do, is to impose mean reversion on the risk-based story. So basically, they find that the risk story holds, yes, but it's not enough to warrant that the value anomaly is entirely reliant on the risk premium and the market risk premium and the beta across the business cycles. So we know, one thing that we know as documented by Hartley and Shea is that it could be found in the South African market that there is a timing to mean reversion and it fluctuates according to business cycles. So if there is a way, which I will find, that the two can be integrated together, that would actually be great to see the relative explanatory power and of the value anomaly and of the abnormal returns earned, or rather the value premium, once a overreaction or an irrational explanation was added, but in a model that incorporates both to see the relative percentage basically of the explanatory power. And that is all. Thank you.
Wow, it's really, really interesting, and I think the presentation is very well done. I just have one thing that I need to point out to you regarding the cross-section and the time series. In the Farmer Frame 1992, they try to see at a particular point in time if a group of stocks, if value outperform, the other group is growth.
Yeah.
And then if that repeats itself every single period. But there was a cross-sectional analysis to see if every period had happened from period to period. But then when they try to incorporate this phenomenon into the model, in the Farmer Frame 3-factor model, that is actually a time series model.
Oh.
You want to see that over the long period of time, you regress the time series on these 3 different factors. What are the payoffs today? Yeah, so you have to, I mean, it's very confusing. I mean, but to really, really understand it, to everybody else, but when I started, I found it confusing, is to read the 1992 article very thoroughly and understand exactly what they did, and then read the 1993, like one after the other. That will both up your knowledge very, very well. And the other thing is that, like when we just started, I know you know your article very well, it seemed like it, and I have no doubt about it, but when you come to the concept that are more difficult to understand, or you will be able to foresee it. Like you just recall your experience when you are reading the article. Then for example, like marginal utility, and then what is meant by during the period that is high for value premium and so on. Slow it down, put your shoes in the people who haven't read it.
Okay.
And then try to explain slower during those key concepts. And make sure that everybody understands, then you move on to the next concept. Okay, so just like when you do lectures, well, I mean, there is a time period that you can explain everything very fast, then you will stuck into one concept. And then I can tell you, whenever you slow down, spend about 5-10 minutes. It's worth it. Okay. Very nice presentation. Good job. Very nice.